Hello everyone and welcome to the very first edition of the OSU Preview Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, football is back and so is Mike Gundy's mullet. I'm Alex Dusky and I am joined by Asa Lucas and Jace Andrews. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves a little bit?
Alright, so I'm Jace Andrews. I covered OSU sports for the past couple of years. I've been working for Big 12 football for about 4 years now, and I was the main reporter for football last year, covering every game from Missouri State all the way to the Fiesta Bowl.
I am Asa Lucas, two-time Big 12 expert for the Poke Report and one of the lead hosts last year. Growing up in Stillwater, so I can tell you all the flavors, all the culture, and even the cynicism of the fans.
And I am Alex Dusky. I was the OSU sports insider for a year. I've covered Cowboy football all 3 years of my college education. I'll be covering them again this year. Just like Jace, I went to and covered the Fiesta Bowl, and this is my second year with the Poke Report. So we are going to have this weekly pregame podcast, and it'll come out the morning of every single Cowboy football game, home or away, that you guys can listen to, and we hope to provide some exciting information for you guys. So let's start off with a brief recap of Cowboy football last season. It was a record-setting year with a Big 12 championship appearance, Bedlam victory, Fiesta Bowl victory, and our defense was unmatched. We finished 12-2 on the year, and we were the only FBS team with 3 wins over 11 win teams. What are your guys' highlights from last season?
First and foremost, the comeback win for the Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame. I mean, that was probably, I'd have to say, a top 5 win in OSU history, probably. I mean, just the way it happened, along with everything that led up into the point. And I want to say, this may be controversial, but I think last year's Bedlam victory was probably the biggest win an OSU had in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That is fair to say, since not last year's, but the decade ago Fiesta Bowl win. That was the second biggest win we've had in history. I can still remember being there shouting SEC with the fans during Bedlam, and then watching Colin Oliver get that sack against Caleb Williams. That just... it was sweet music to my soul.
I was, in the stands with all the fans, and when there was about a minute and a half left, everyone started going to the front, ready to rush, and then...
Guilty.
And then Caleb Williams took off, and we're all like, no, what do we do? But thankfully, we were able to get that Bedlam win. As you noted, a lot of props to our defense,
yes,
which unfortunately we did lose a lot of good guys on defense, probably most notably Malcolm Rodriguez, Devin Harper, Christian Holmes. However, we have 10 starters back on offense, and we've gotten some new people in. Have you guys heard much about the freshman class or any transfers?
There's a couple of guys that kind of catch my eye. Most notably on the offensive side, it's going to be Ollie Gordon. He's a running back. Played a played a good amount of time in the spring game before injuring himself, but he is good, ready for the season. As of right now, though, he is listed as the third stringer back for the Cowboys. I don't suspect that to be the case by the end of the season. He's the guy I'd have to watch for in terms of freshmen. We did get a transfer linebacker from Texas Tech. Not too many stats on him, but he is probably going to be definitely needed, given we lost Malcolm, given we lost Devin, given we lost even Colby Harvell-Peel. I mean, if you just go with those 3 guys, they combined for a third of our tackles last year. Mm-hmm. And so, in my mind, the defense is going to be the question mark this season, which was not the question mark last year.
And adding on to that, we did lose defensive coordinator Jim Knowles.
We did, but I will say we lost him before the Fiesta Bowl, and
That's
so
true.
Everybody who coordinated that game is still here and will be coordinating for the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. They kind of got a practice game under their belt, and in that second half of the Notre Dame game, that was maybe the best defense we played all year.
Just to kind of pivot back, talking about this new class coming in offensively, at least if you dive into the trenches, we're looking a lot better. Even though Casey Collier, he's no longer with us, the USC lineman. But we do have Jason Brooks. We do have Tyrone Weber. I mean, we got some things to be optimistic about. I think this will be the first offensive line group we've had at least more than one starter come back within the past couple of years. So that's kind of nice. At least Spencer maybe will not have to scramble as much.
And I think the last 2 years for sure, Gundy said multiple times in press conferences how the offensive line was playing musical chairs with injuries. So hopefully we can kind of wave off the injuries this season. Looking at Oklahoma State from this preseason, they were voted number 12 in the AP Top 25. OU was ranked 9th and Baylor 10th. And in the coaches poll, OSU moved up to 11. The other two stayed the same, and Texas was bumped into 18th. This was the highest preseason ranking for both polls for the Cowboys since 2017. And I'm on the media email list, and I'm pretty sure I've gotten an email every single day for the last month about these preseason watch lists that Cowboy football players are on. Spencer Sanders, he has at least 6 watch lists that he's on. Colin Oliver's named to a couple. And Mike Gundy is on the Dodd Trophy preseason watch list. How much do you guys think these preseason watch lists actually pan out over the season?
That's what I was going to actually gauge another question, but I think that's a bit high for us right now. I don't think we are top 15 in the nation. We do have a lot of returning talent, and I'm worried that's going to set us up for trouble looking down the line against schools like Texas, who they'd be lucky to go above 500. And so coming into Stillwater for homecoming, if we're top 5 in the nation, you're almost asking for a classic OSU disaster homecoming game.
I think the thing that I look at is last year Oklahoma State did win a lot of the close games. Mm-hmm. And that's something that they're going to need to do again this year if they want a repeat performance of going to a New Year's Six Bowl, possibly better. Talking about Spencer Sanders, though, he is, for once, I have complete and utter confidence in him this year. After a tremendous 2021 season, a tremendous way to end it with a record-setting bowl win, he looks to be probably our most biggest asset on the offensive side. You mentioned those awards, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award and the Manning Award. Those are top-tier watch lists.
The Walter Camp Player of the Year Award.
Correct. And then another one, Colin Oliver on the defensive side. He was named to the Action Network preseason All-American. I have full confidence he could be an All-American this year. He was a freshman All-American last year. Those are the two guys that I look to on both sides that are going to have to lead this team if they want to play the way they did last season. It's just, like Asa said, I think it's a little high for us because we did lose a lot of people. And although we played well last year, a lot of those games were close and that could easily go a different way.
State, that could have gone a completely different way.
Even Missouri State. But if we go back to the first 3 games, we did not look good. And that's a big thing for today's game is that we want to see a dominant performance in terms of just everybody going out there and playing solid football, which hasn't happened.
Adding on to you saying last season we didn't look too good, but how well Spencer Sanders is looking, he's our starter for 4 years.
Yep.
How many minutes of an opening game has Spencer Sanders actually played? Because he's been injured 2-3 years now?
1 quarter. That was against the Tulsa game 2 years ago.
Isn't that crazy?
Because he was out for COVID last year.
And with Spencer Sanders' legacy, I love throwing that word around, and I did that a lot last year on our pregame show. But this is Sanders' first time. He'd be the first quarterback in OSU history if he can beat OU to have consecutive wins against OU. He would be the first one. And then you talk about GOAT of OSU quarterbacks. For me, that's it. You beat OU twice in a row, you got it. No question.
I know that's far away, but I will say this. Given the realignment, given what could possibly happen in the coming years, if Spencer Sanders can lead the Cowboys to back-to-back wins in Bedlam, one at Boone Pickens, the last one in Norman, I would have to say he's put on the podium right there. It doesn't matter what happens after college.
I'm trying to think back to last season. I remember reading the headline. I believe Spencer Sanders is the second most winningest quarterback behind Gundy.
It was him and Mason Rudolph last year battling out for second.
Okay, that's what
I don't know exactly what the rankings are. I'm sure I could find it, but I believe you're on the right track there.
So I think he's up there. And it's been awesome to see his growth. I remember freshman year, they're like, oh, who the heck is this Spencer Sanders kid? Like, he's not going to amount to anything. And then he gets the first Bedlam win in, how many years? The biggest OSU
almost
comeback.
A decade.
Yeah, biggest Fiesta Bowl comeback with Spencer Sanders at the helm. So he does have a lot to prove this season.
He really does, and he's had that symptom or that classic kind of Spencer Sanders. You think, oh, here's going to be an interception or here comes a fumble. And last year he kind of got rid of that. Had the lowest amount of turnovers he's ever had in a season. But this is it, man. This is your senior year. We've all been here. We all coming in. We're all graduating around the same time. And I just want to see Spencer Sanders succeed. He's a hard quarterback not to cheer for.
He is, and I think that's the biggest thing is he has somewhat of a, I know it's a different point, but a Mike Boynton attitude and a kind of a community leader. He's always talking to people, always on their side. And that's what you look for in a quarterback. It's what you look for in a quarterback room to lead some of these younger guys like maybe Gunnar Gundy, who was named the backup, trying to lead this team, especially a younger team, into, I'm not going to say untested waters, but into a new season where instead of being the hunter, you're the hunted.
What do you think, kind of skipping past this season, if Spencer Sanders decides to go to the draft or if he stays, let's pretend he leaves, and we have Mike Gundy in his, next year would be his 19th year as head coach, and then his son comes in as the OSU starting quarterback. Like, what kind of era would that be for Cowboy football?
So we would have the conference, we have new teams coming in. If you want to have a time to do something kind of funky as to have Gunner start,
next year would be the year.
I mean, that would be the year. We don't have great quarterback depth, so that is also a problem. If Spencer goes down, yes, Gunner has been a part of the system, and I've even covered him in my time of looking over Stillwater High School. Like the IQs and the fundamentals of football, he understands and he knows very well. But I just don't know if he has that it factor for Division I football.
Well, hopefully as long as Spencer stays healthy, he'll have a whole year of learning underneath him and kind of experiencing that.
I think next year's going to be a bigger question because Garrett Rangel is a top-tier talent. I'm no offense to Gunnar Gundy. He's a great guy. He's a great quarterback. I was a little surprised to hear he was named the backup, but I think that owes to his football IQ, his football knowledge. And in that spring game, you could see Garrett kind of just testing some things that did not work, and I think it'll be good for him to learn under Spencer this year because Spencer, if you like it or not, has been the guy to make a lot of those mistakes and learn from it.
Yeah.
So
now I will say, when we were at the Fiesta Bowl, we were able to attend one of the team's practice, and for smarter reasons, they decided to put Gunner in so that the media got to see Gunner instead of Spencer. And he had some beautiful touchdown passes in the scrimmages. Now, granted, it was its own practice, but I think and that was, January, December? So imagine what he could do next year.
Well, I think it'll be cool to have him as the backup this year because I talk a lot about having those close games. Look at TCU. We absolutely blew them out of the water and got to put in Gunner. I expect us to have at least one or two of those games. I'm looking at you, Kansas, and be able to put in Gunner in some actual scenarios with first-team receivers, maybe a backup running back, heck, even Ollie Gordon, like we said, and see what he can do. Because I do have faith in his abilities. It's just going to be interesting to see in terms of getting obviously the way forward, what's going to happen in the future.
So looking at this season, kind of taking a step back from football and looking at it statistically, the season ticket sales has already surpassed last year's by 1,000 tickets. I have not found this week's update, but last week we were at 46,000 season tickets. And the student all sports passes sold out for the second time ever in OSU Athletics history, and that's a max of 12,500 passes. So BPS is going to be packed this season.
And sadly, I was not able to get my all sports pass, so I'll be having to use the charity of other students and colleagues.
Anyone listening, if you have an extra ticket, send it Ace's way.
I'll pay the $250.
So the season starts off with our 3 non-conference games all at home. Obviously tonight with Central Michigan, next weekend with Arizona State, and then the 17th, which is Oklahoma State's family weekend, is against Arkansas, Pine Bluff. What do you guys think? Just kind of a quick overview of those 3 non-conference opponents.
Last 2 we're definitely going to win. Arizona State has a lot to figure out. They don't have an identity. They don't have a lot of great players. That's not a problem. Awesome Pine Bluff, could kind of be a Missouri State situation. I don't see it. Central Michigan, though, that's a little bit scary to me as someone who's watched the Cowboys over the years. That can be a bit scary.
We'll finish this up, and then I'll let you recap the last time.
But I will say I expect us to go 3-0 out of these first 3 games.
Jace?
3-0, and in a perfect world, our defense finds its identity again, and it shows up like it did in that Fiesta Bowl. And those linebackers who are replacing Malcolm and Devin become exactly what they are. If you think about it, who was before Malcolm and Devin? Amon he was a pretty good guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
and Ogbong Bamiga.
Yeah,
That was
there you go.
one of the very first Cowboy football names I had to learn my freshman year.
So in theory, the linebacker turnover in Oklahoma State has been great. Now, with that being said, our defensive coordinator was also our linebackers coach. So losing him, it's a little tough.
Big 12 conference play will start up against Baylor in Waco, October 1st. Asa, what are you feeling about that?
That's very... I'm not feeling great about it. If I'm being realistic, I see us losing that one. That's how I feel. I mean, Baylor's just so talented. Their offensive and defensive lines are big and mean and nasty. Very talented. That's just a tough... And Waco's a tough environment, too.
Jace, let me ask you this. If we beat Baylor in Waco, could the Cowboys go undefeated?
Yes, because that is one of 3 games that scare me.
Okay.
The other 2 are obviously the big one's Bedlam.
Of course. Of course.
Who isn't scared?
Yeah, the other one, and this could change throughout the season. There may be other teams that I find more scary down the line, but as of right now, that Homecoming Texas game is just scary because of what happened 2 years ago on a Homecoming Texas game.
I remember that. The students throwing the cushions down when the players were leaving?
Funny enough, I was actually in Waco and watching that game on TV while I was covering Baylor football and was like, what is happening?
But wasn't that technically not homecoming? Didn't they cancel homecoming because of COVID that year?
They canceled homecoming, but everybody bought their tickets. There was a sold-out crowd. It had the feel of homecoming. There was somewhat activities. I'm not going to say homecoming-like because obviously it was kind of downgraded because of the whole COVID situation. I just hope we don't have a repeat of that scenario at all in terms of the way that the offense played so well, but yet the defense just couldn't hold it.
And if you look at the... Sorry to catch up. I was just saying this is really interesting to me. If you look at the series history within the last 10 years, I think it's only 1 or 2 of the home teams have won. It's always been on the road wins. It's really odd. Oklahoma State does a great job on the road in Austin, but for whatever reason, when Texas comes up here, Texas does a really good job. So it's really strange how that dynamic works.
So that homecoming game is October 22nd. And Bedlam is in Norman, November 19th, and the season will conclude at home against West Virginia the following week, November 26th. So, your preseason record predictions. What is your record? If/when do we lose? Who's it to? Jace, do you want to start?
So, in my notes, I have this written down. There's 2 ways the season can go, and it's really hard to tell which one it's going to be right now. Now, option number 1, the one that we all want, Cowboys have a repeat of last year, maybe even better. This time they get to the Big 12 championship like last year and win it instead of losing by that inch. And you have, I don't really want to talk about that. But you have a chance to go to, you're guaranteed a New Year's Six Bowl because you win your championship. At best, you could also get a national championship and face a pretty good team.
Whoa.
Like I said, that is really hard to think about because I am one of those people that I gotta see it to believe it, and I believe in the Cowboys, but I also have not seen anything.
Ted Lasso belief in the
Correct.
team.
Oh, don't be throwing that, Alex. You're gonna make me look like I don't love the show.
Well, you do. We love Ted Lasso.
The second option is that the Cowboys lose all the close games they did last year, so Baylor, Texas, Oklahoma, maybe a TCU or Kansas State in there, and they end up going about 9-3, 8-4, and just
kind
a
of
good
what
bowl
we
game.
saw the last
Correct.
couple of years. Asa, what are your predictions?
Well, you got to go with Ted Lasso when he tells you to believe. Here's and I've read a lot about this too, and I agree with it. I think a 10-2 record. I see us going into the Big 12 championship. People ask me, I see us either going 2nd or 3rd in the Big 12 this year. But 10-2, 7-2, we're gonna lose either Bedlam, Baylor, or Texas, and we'll win one of those 3. So that's where I see us going 7-2 and somehow sneaking into the Big 12 championship for possibly a rematch against Oklahoma.
I will say this year, the one game that I look to as I want Spencer Sanders to have a game of his life is against Iowa State. Just the amount of times that they've kind of hurt an amazing season.
Last year,
2011. It's just sore subject with them, and when we play them at home, we play them very well. I hope that game is... I hope that game's a beatdown. Without Brock Purdy there and Breece Hall, it should be.
It's a completely different Iowa State team,
Correct,
basically.
completely.
And I'll be interested too when we're on the road against K-State, because that's we kind of slow down in Manhattan. It's a very odd environment.
Kansas State to Oklahoma State has always been that dark horse in terms of, they're going to beat them when they shouldn't. This year, I've heard that Kansas State can be that team again. I've heard that team is overranked. You have Deuce Vaughn, you have the Nebraska quarterback, now Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez, excuse me, and it can go both ways, but I just don't like Manhattan, like you said. TCU is also a scary one. We lost that game 2 years ago on the road. Amon G. Carter's a tough stadium. Just have to see.
Well, everyone with their dad's BMWs and their sport passes, they get loud.
All right, I kind of agree. I'm thinking like a 9-3 record. See, I
9-3.
That's what Jace said. He said 9-3, 8-4.
At best, it's 11-1, 10-2.
There we go. That's
and then the bottom of the barrel for us is 8-4.
I agree.
Correct.
That
bottom
is
of the barrel is
the
8-4.
ceiling.
If we go below that, there's some things that
I agree that Baylor and OU, with their similar logos, with the B and the O and the U underneath.
That's gross.
Right. I agree those two are scary games. I'm not really concerned about Texas. Don't want to jinx anything, but I think what we saw last season is the team really rallies around how the stadium atmosphere is. And those homecoming games, while granted, 2020, it wasn't sold out. The stadium was 70% capacity? So you're having BPS sold out. Hopefully it'll be a night game. I think that atmosphere will just kind of drive the Cowboys. I'm not quite sure who my third iffy team is. I'm thinking maybe TCU or K-State, the purple teams. But I feel good about a 9-3 or 10-2 season.
Purple is a scary color. But adding on to what you said, last year, talk about the big games. In terms of fan atmosphere, you have opening night against Missouri State, and then from there, Baylor, preceded by probably OU at the end of the year on homecoming.
Homecoming, correct. And the 100th homecoming last year, too. Missouri
State was a little tough, and then Baylor
we
ended
didn't
up
have
lost.
the pom-poms.
Correct.
The pom-poms are what, I still have my Bedlam pom-poms, so they're one of my apartment decorations.
Now, I know Spencer wasn't there in that first game, but you could see he felt the pressure against Baylor. But I don't think I saw him feel that type of pressure the rest of the season. In Bedlam, I swear that was the most, I'm going to go out here and play my game. His run in the third quarter, the touchdown run, or just short of the goal line coming towards the south end zone, that was one of the most smoothest and greatest quarterback plays I've seen Spencer Sanders make.
He's really proved a lot of people wrong.
And what's funny is you can ask fans, and I'm sure they'll probably lie about it, but last year when Shane Illingworth started that Missouri State game, there was a lot of people that were happy about it. I was not one of them, but there was a lot of people that were, and Spencer kind of had a chip on his shoulder from that, and he showed it off.
So looking into tonight's game, starting the season, Mike Gundy is in his 18th year as head coach, and if he wins tonight, he will get his 150th win, and that would make him the fourth active FBS coach with 150 wins at his current school, alongside Nick Saban at Alabama, Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, and Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. And like I mentioned at the...
Imagine Mike Gundy's name being amongst those coaches. That's just fun to hear.
And as I mentioned at the top of the show, the mullet, while it is not in its full glory yet, it is back. He shaved that off, 2 years ago? So he's switching it up again. The Cowboys are 87-29-5 in home openers. This is our first Thursday game since we were against Missouri State in 2018, and we are 11-0 in Thursday games during the Gundy era. As we kind of mentioned earlier, this is the third matchup between the two schools in 2015 and 2016 previously. Asa, would you like to talk about the last time Central Michigan and Oklahoma State faced off?
Do I have to?
Yes.
Well, this is.
Where do you start?
And and I can tell you right now that whole audible sequence is exactly how every other Oklahoma State fan feels from that time. I mean, that was a different time in Cowboy football. People were very optimistic. I mean, we still are too. But really what comes down to it is the referees cost Oklahoma State a game by one of the most improbable plays you've ever seen, with a lateral to a wide receiver and a Hail Mary with an intentional grounding on a fourth down. It was just this whole blob of a mess of a game, which, to be fair, I mean, Oklahoma State shouldn't have had it that close either. That should have been like a 2-score game at least. So I know for a fact, if you can look at the newspapers around Stillwater, everyone's pretty irritated that we're playing Central Michigan again. This isn't going to be like the ASU game or like a Tulsa game. This is, we remember what you did. And
we're not going to let you do it again.
We're not going to let you do it again. So I promise you there's going to be some bully ball going around. There's going to be a lot of frustration and anger.
Just for a recap for anybody who doesn't understand what we're talking about and is severely confused right now, Oklahoma State played CMU back in 2016, correct? And they immediately got up to a 2-score lead and looked pretty good in the first half. And then it kind of fell down. CMU started to come back. And with 30 seconds, or on the fourth down, was it fourth down, right? It was an intentional grounding call that allowed for one untimed down, which by rule should have ended the game. And so CMU got one extra play. They threw the ball, a receiver caught it, lateraled back to another receiver, and ran all the way to the left side of the corner end zone, dove, touched the pylon, and won. And then the next 2 days, we're all talking about how that play should have not happened, and the referees were fined and suspended because of the wrong
and
call.
And Asa has his head in his hands and is holding back tears.
Thank you for doing that, partner. I appreciate it.
I have to make sure the fans are informed on what happened.
You want to talk about Bedlam again,
Sorry
right?
for that.
Like those good memories.
Yes,
Colin
Oliver. Yeah, it was just one of those things. As much as it sucked to watch, I mean, it's what makes college football beautiful. Like, stuff like that doesn't happen in the NFL.
To be fair, it makes this game feel a lot better.
It does. It does. This is a game that has been on the calendar for a while, and it's been circled. I can't tell probably how many times.
I say feel better. We got to watch the game first.
Correct.
True.
Just kind of jumping around before we end the podcast, some key players from both sides. The quarterback position, we have Spencer Sanders, and for the Chippewas, it's Daniel Richardson. He's a sophomore. Do you guys have any insight or information you want to share on him?
He's a pretty solid quarterback. I have some of his stats here: 2,500 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and only 6 picks. You know, that's in the MAC, but still, he's growing really well. He's not much of a scrambler, but I mean, he's pretty good. And are you going to talk about the running back?
Do I have to? So they do have a pretty good running scheme. Now, you mentioned Daniel Richardson. He is not the guy to run the ball. Mm-hmm. That's not him at all. Mm-hmm. He is a passing scheme guy, and that's pretty much what he's going to do all game. Looking at the running side, the passing leads into the offense. Now, their main running back is going to be Lou Nicholas III, and he is pretty good. I would say that. He had 341 attempts last year, which was aches and boundaries over the next guy who had 36 attempts. He was just shy.
I think you mean leaps and bounds.
Leaps and bounds, sorry. And he was just shy of 2,000 yards, ran about 5.5 average, had 16 touchdowns.
And he's a sophomore as well, correct?
Correct, which is, they're going to be pretty good considering they now have a year under their belt.
Correct. Looking at their 2 other running backs, Miles Bailey and Marion Lukes, they're also sophomores. Switching over to the receiving core for the Chippewas, we have Jalen Magai, I think, sophomore, Carlos Carrier, who's a senior, and Dallas Dixon, who's a senior. So kind of seeing that mix of upperclassmen, underclassmen. What do you guys think we'll see from the receivers?
Good hands. They can get a jump ball. Jason Taylor is going to be working out there at the safety position. They got some speed. They're pretty good last year. They're coming in here with a 5-game winning streak from last year. Ended up winning the bowl game. I believe it was against Western Kentucky on the bowl win. But they're a really good team. It's nothing to scoff at. Mm-hmm. And it says something when you have a Power 5 conference team coming in here next weekend, and you're probably still looking at this game more than that one, like Asa said.
It's true. I mean, what you can expect from Central Michigan, a lot of short passes and kind of a lot of slants. They do like to open up the spread. And, you'll see some fades, of course, but you can expect a lot of just old-fashioned kind of football, maybe for those who were watching Oklahoma State football like 10 to 15 years ago, just a lot of runs up the middle and a lot of short passes.
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned at the top of this show, we have 10 starters returning on offense. So with the receivers and running backs, we have a lot of familiar names: Jaden Bray, Brennan Presley, John Paul Richardson, all receivers. Dominic Richardson, Jaden Nixon, 2 familiar names from the running back, and then Ollie Gordon, who you mentioned earlier.
Big guy.
Switching over to the defensive side for both teams with the Cowboys, familiar names being Brock Martin, Colin Oliver, Tyler Lacey, Corey Black, and we talked about Devin Harper leaving, and now we have his brother Thomas Harper coming on the defensive side. Asa, you got anything to say?
I am apprehensive about the defense and just nerves. First game of the year. Last year, while we were doing this show with a camera in front of our faces, this almost seemed like every game I was like, golly, we're gonna lose. And that was with the top 5 defense in the country. So now you're not gonna have top 5 with the pieces that we have. I could arguably by the end of the year, if you told me it would be a top 25 or top 20 defense, sure, I buy that. But I just hope that they are focused and ready to go against Central Michigan, because this is a good team. Mm-hmm. They're gonna go 7-5 with a bowl win, I think. So it's a good little test, a good little contest at the beginning of the year.
I think, and this may sound surprising, I'm not too worried as much about the defense as I am the offense, just because of how young they are. The defensive turnover in terms of people coming in and being just as good, if not better than the guys before them, is pretty good.
I'll agree. We had a lot of people who were the second guys up last season that just because we didn't see them play was because the guy in front of them was amazing.
And the reason, and the last one I'll give, is because on offense, young guys, and there's one guy who we did lose on the offense, and he's arguably the biggest guy, Tay Martin. Mm-hmm. Caught 10 touchdowns of our 25 receiving, and he's a big loss. The next guy below him was Brennan with 5. We don't really have a key touchdown receiver right now, and that's going to be tested on the first game, especially with a lot of these guys who are projected to be starters for the entire year had injury issues the past year, and we'll have to see if they can stay healthy this time.
You did leave out one name that I wanted to throw in, Trace Ford.
Yes,
he's coming back. He's someone I am excited and optimistic about. I think he's going to have a great campaign.
Now, remind us again, last season he didn't play due to a preseason injury. Then 2 seasons ago, did he get injured halfway through? Or
It's the Baylor game, right?
He's got some really great stats, though. Like, back in 2020, we're talking 4.5 sacks, 15 solo tackles, and that's all being on the line. I mean, he's really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. So, before you guys give your predictions, I do want to read what the line says. So, ESPN has Oklahoma State at a 95% chance to win, and Oklahoma State is favored, or the line is 21.5, Oklahoma State. So, kind of a big margin of victory from what the people are predicting. With that being said, what are you guys' predictions?
I'll let the Stillwater native kick us off.
So here's what I'm going to go with.
Sorry, the over-under is 59, if that helps.
Okay. I think we're going to be under.
Okay.
I can agree with that.
I think we're going to win. I think Oklahoma State's going to win 31-14 against Central Michigan.
I think that's a fair score. I'm probably going to give a little bit of backing on my words I just said. I think the defense is going to struggle a little bit in the first half, but the second half, I think they're going to be what we're going to see most of the season. If I had to give a score prediction, I'm going to say lower scoring, just because that's how the first game has been over the past couple years. Probably going to go 28-17, Oklahoma State beating CMU. And CMU does get like a little bit of a last, fourth quarter touchdown.
Don't speak that into existence. Come
fourth
on.
quarter
Jace!
touchdown, not
What are you saying?
Hey, even if they got a touchdown on that one, we still win the game. That's the biggest thing.
With your prediction.
Be up by more than 8 with a minute to go. That's all I asked for.
That's a hot take there, Jace. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna give a little weird score because I feel last year we always gave these predictions that made sense, and Oklahoma State did something completely opposite, or we were like, it's gonna be a high-scoring game,
the
and
Cowboys
then there's 20 points total.
Like Baylor and Oklahoma State last year.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm gonna say 24-13. Lower gives us a comfortable margin of victory, but I agree with you, Jace. We're going to see some defensive issues kind of in the first half. And I also expect the Chippewas to be the first on the board, even if it's just a field goal.
I can agree with that. I can agree.
I think the offense with any team, the first game's always going to be back, even if you're coming back with all of your starters. So I think there's just a lot of moving parts that have to click, but I think the Cowboys will pull it out.
Two things that I want to see in this outing for me to feel confident about this team. One, Spencer Sanders has got to play the whole game. I want to see him just be a lot more comfortable with the ball.
And show
go
what
out
he can
there.
do.
Correct. Prove himself. And I think this is a good team to do it because their defense, unlike their offense, is not the best in terms of stopping passing. If he can have that type of game we're expecting, that's one to see. And then another one, like I mentioned earlier, I want a dominant outing. And that doesn't mean winning by 40 points or winning by a lot, but it does mean looking confident out there. Missouri State, Tulsa the past 2 years, I think both of those games I was biting my nails
close,
the entire
correct.
game. I don't want to do that this year with CMU.
I think a good metric, if at the end of these 3 games, Spencer Sanders can have 10 to 14 touchdowns and 1 or 2 interceptions, then I think we're in for something special. If he does less than that, total touchdowns against these teams, then we're going to have problems.
Write it down, folks. That's the number to beat if we're going to the national championship.
I remember last season we'd say if the Cowboys punted less than 6 times and still pulled out a victory, you know? All right, well, there you have it, the very first episode of the OSU Preview. I'm Alex Dusky, joined by Jace Andrews and Asa Lucas. Be sure you're keeping up with the Poke Report on all social medias, and we will see you next Saturday at 10 a.m. again. Go Pokes!
Go Pokes!